Let's talk about Obafemi Awolowo's march to prison. In the annals of Nigerian history, few figures loom as large as Chief Obafemi Awolowo, a man whose vision for a united, progressive Nigeria was as bold as it was controversial. But his story is not just one of triumph, it is also a tale of betrayal, imprisonment, and the unraveling of democracy. This is the story of how the twilight of democracy in Nigeria turned into utter darkness.
The welfare of millions of people for generations to come may be affected by the wisdom which we here display. If Nigerian leaders and our British partners are to prove themselves worthy of their trust, now is the time for us solemnly and truly to dedicate ourselves to seeking the greatest good of the greatest number of our people in Nigeria.
It was 1960 and Nigeria has just gained independence. The future seemed bright, full of promise. Obafemi Awolowo, the charismatic leader of the Action Group, had relinquished his position as Premier of the Western region to pursue a national role in the federal parliament. His deputy, Samuel Ladoke Akintola, took over as Premier. But what began as a partnership soon turned into a bitter power struggle, one that could change the course of Nigerian history. At the heart of the conflict was a clash of ideologies. Awolowo believed in party supremacy, the idea that the party's principles should guide government decisions. Akintola, on the other hand, believed in government supremacy, prioritizing governance over party loyalty. This ideological rift torn the Action Group apart, culminating in the infamous disorder in the Western Region House of Assembly on the 25th of May, 1962. The chaos in the House of Assembly gave Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa the pretext to declare a state of emergency in the Western region. This move marked a turning point in Nigeria's young democracy. Worsening the crisis was the setting up of the Coca Commission to investigate the finances of the Western region under Obafemi Awolowo's leadership. To many, this was not just an investigation, it was a political witch hunt. As we tell this story, it's important we make references to books. And one book that is quite important in understanding the past is this book, Adventures in Power, Book 1, My March Through Prison, written by Obafemi Awolowo. This is the book, My March Through Prison, written by Obafemi Awolowo. In this book, he tells the story of what happened from 1962 to when he was released from prison in 1966. So let's read from this book. Awolowo said, on 25th of May, 1962, the meeting of the Western Region House of Assembly, which was held that morning with the prior consent of the Prime Minister, Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, ended in violent disturbance. Another meeting, which was convened on the afternoon of the same day, also with the consent of the Prime Minister, went fairly smoothly until it was suddenly disbanded by a smoke bomb on the orders of the Inspector General of Police in Lagos. From that time, events moved rather fast and ominously. The sage continues. On the 29th of May, the Federal Parliament met to pass a resolution declaring a state of emergency in the Western region. On the same day, I was served with an order restricting me to stay within a 3-mile radius of my house in Ikenne. It was with some difficulty and a touch of bravado on my part that I got the Inspector General, Mr. Bovell, to agree to let me return to Ibadan to pack a few things for my enforced stay at Ikenne. I arrived in Ikenne on the evening of the 31st of May. 20 days later, I had to move to Lekki, a mosquito-infested island of Ekpe. You could imagine what Lekki was at that time. Awolowo described it in his book as a mosquito-infested island of Ekpe. If you are wondering where I'm reading from, I'm reading from Awolowo's book, My March Through Prison. Remember, it is a class of politics, history, and power. It is also a reading class. So Obafemi Awolowo continues. After spending 13 days in Lekki, I was ordered back to Ikenne, this time to stay within a 1.5-mile radius of my house. While in Lekki, I heard the news that the administration of the Western region from 1954 to 1962, with particular reference to certain boards and corporations, were going to be the subject of a commission of inquiry. On the 4th of July, I arrived back in Ikenne. On Friday, 20th July, another order of restriction to stay within a 1.5-mile radius of number 7 Bell Avenue, Ikoyi, Lagos, as from the 22nd of July, was served on me. Awo is not done describing the events of that time. He says, on the 18th, 19th, and the 21st of September, my houses in Ikenne and Ibadan and my residence at Bell Avenue were thoroughly searched. Then, on the 22nd of September, I was placed under house arrest, and to members of the public, I was rendered from that date completely incommunicado. Why these happenings were being contrived with ruthless determination, the Coca inquiry moved on with uninterrupted and remorseless progression. What had I done to deserve such humiliating and degrading treatment? Awo asked in his book. You know, if you read this book, you will feel his pain. You would understand why they feared him. And you would also know why they tried from independence to relegate him to the background. But he refused to be relegated. He resisted them. If you continued here, he says, I was satisfied that I had faithfully, dutifully, and honestly kept my charge. As leader of government business and premier, I had served my time and the people of the Western region well. As a political leader, I had consciously and relentlessly done all in my power to advocate and promote the best interest of the peoples of Nigeria. In the circumstances, I deserve nothing but praise and a hallowed place of honor. But instead, I was being pushed around like a worthless chattel by those who had not contributed anything, as indeed I had, to the progress of Nigeria. So who are those that had not contributed anything? If you read Awolowo's book, if you read Adventures in Power, Book 2, he mentioned them. He talked about Ahmadu Bello, Balewa. Some felt Awolowo was arrogant. But you would feel that way because he operated at a very high mental magnitude. So have you read this book, My March Through Prison? Before I drop the book, I want you to listen to this part. During the moments of this internal review, I regarded my oppressors, persecutors, and political adversaries as a wicked and ruthless cabal. They controlled all the governments in the country and hence all the political powers. They did not hide their unbending determination to bring about my political destruction and, if possible, my physical extermination as well. That's serious, is it not? That is the power game. Understanding the power game is also about understanding history. That is why books like this are important. As you can see, Obafemi Awolowo wrote more than 14 books. These are his books. You can see them here on camera. These are Awolowo's books. If you are interested in these books, order them from udarabooks.com, udarabooks.com, or through our WhatsApp number. We are talking about Awolowo's march to prison.
But I must warn that I have written only for those Nigerians who are prepared to learn, to study, to make painstaking research, to absorb prejudices, and to think systematically and constructively. Up to now, it is the habit with many of us to approach the titanic, intricate, and pressing problems of our country with blameworthy casualness, insufficient study and research, loose and desultory thinking, supercilious complacency, deep-seated prejudices, and insensate partisanship. I've deliberately ventured to invite all our leaders in particular, and the entire body of educated Nigerians in general, to a more serious, more objective, more thoughtful, more constructive, and more altruistic approach to our economic, political, and social problems.
Adding insult to injury, in 1963, Awolowo and 30 of his political associates were accused of plotting to overthrow the federal government. They were charged with treasonable felony, conspiracy to commit a felony, and conspiracy to effect an unlawful purpose. I discussed these treasonable felony charges with the late leader of Afenifere, Pa Ayo Adebanjo. Were you among those that were sent to Ghana to topple the Tafawa Balewa government?
We went to Ghana to study Nkrumah's form of organization, the CPP. They were the ruling party there. As an organizing secretary, we went there. That was what happened. There was no question of calling there to come and topple anybody.
But
that was the allegation when they wanted to get rid of the opposition.
Was there a plan to remove Tafawa Balewa?
We only opposed to Buhari government. There's no plan to remove him democratically.
There was no plot
I don't
remove him forcefully.
I don't know about any plot to remove him forcefully. But I know we are doing everything just the way APC are trying to remove Jonathan.
Sam Ikoku was part of the AG.
Yes.
He was an Awolowo man.
Yes.
So listen to what he said.
Yes.
He said, "We were fed up with the way the Nigerian system, the Nigerian state, and the Nigerian government were operating. We were deeply committed to a change of government, and we saw that waiting for elections would not produce any solution to the problem. This was what we did. We started preparations for it and the preparations had gone very far, and I believe we would have pulled it off. But unfortunately for us, our leader was so kind to the Nigerian police that he had a police informant among his planners, and so the police knew every move we were making, and so it was easy to trip us up. Our leader even became the number 2 citizen in the country. I felt it was time to tell the country the truth so that our history would be correct. So all I'm saying is that, yes, there was an attempt to overthrow the government. Yes, I took part in the attempt. Yes, it failed, thanks to people like MD Yusuf and co. Chief Adebanjo, what do you have to say?
That's his view. That's not my view. That's SG Koku talking, not Adebanjo.
A member of the AG.
Look, during the Treasonable felony, late Professor Olobamiru gave evidence that he was a member of the planning committee to school. But when he was questioned at the trial, that's another matter.
You ran away. You did not come to the country during that treason trial, right?
Yes.
Why did you run away?
I didn't run away. I will give you the background. By the time they were arresting people for, after we left a rally for detention, it was Chief Obafemi who said we should not allow all of us to be arrested here, and that he was not going to leave the country. But there must be people who will be championing our cause abroad, telling what is happening at home. That was how myself and Ikuku were sent abroad, not because we ran away.
Ikuku was in Ghana too?
Yeah, he was my leader in Ghana.
So if Ikuku accepted this, why did he choose to accept?
Unfortunately, you should have asked him.
On September 11th, 1963, Justice George Shudende Sowemimo sentenced Awolowo to 10 years in prison with hard labor. Awo, speaking in court, made this point. I quote him, his allocutors. He says, since 1957, I have fought with vigor against the feudal system in the northern region and for its eradication. I have also fought to prevent the spread of this evil political system to other parts of Nigeria. I have always fought for what I believe without relenting and regardless of consequences to myself. In the book My March Through Prison, you will read the full statement Awo made before he was sentenced to prison by Justice George Shudende Sowemimo. Shola Odunfa was a journalist with the Nigerian Tribune at the time. Awolowo went to prison and the Tribune almost collapsed.
Oh, yeah.
How did you survive?
I was employed during the trial. I didn't cover the trial. Some of the other more experienced reporters did. But when it came to the appeal, I was the lead reporter for the Tribune at the appeal. And I don't think we've had any case like that since then in Nigeria. Covering from the court was something else. It was something else. And you had the best lawyers in this country arguing points of law. It was so exciting.
Were you heartbroken when he was sent to prison?
As a human being, I was. Especially when his appeal was dismissed. It was a sad day for me, personally. It was a sad day for me.
Awolowo was not just fighting against the feudalistic North, led by Ahmadu Bello and Tafawa Balewa. He was also fighting against his party men that have turned against him. Let me read from Obafemi Awolowo's book again. He says here, the Peace Committee failed for reasons which are more relevant to the subject matter of another book in this series. But the point I wish to emphasize here is that Sir Adetokunbo Ademola hosted the Peace Committee, and from authentic report, he did not hide his support for the preposterous demands of Akintola and his UPP. Ademola Adetokunbo at the time was the head of Nigeria's judiciary. So if you read this book, he was the one who picked Sowemimo to try Obafemi Awolowo. Awolowo described the intrigues of the time. You know, he gave a brief of how he knew the plan was to sentence him to prison. It's a book you should read, My March Through Prison. You will see raw politics and power. And it was his kinsmen that were used against him. He said, all along the line, Adetokunbo Ademola thought I was arrogant, stubborn, and conceited, and constituted a stumbling block to the progress of Yoruba people under a Hausa Fulani regime. Immediately after my arrest, he masterminded a movement for the formation of a single cultural organization for the Yorubas. This was aimed at the dissolution of Egbe Omo Oduduwa, the founding of which I spearheaded, first in London in 1945 and then in Nigeria in 1948. He was determined that I should be destroyed politically and that every trace of me in the politics of Nigeria should be totally erased. This is Awolowo talking about Adetokunbo Ademola, the Chief Justice of Nigeria at the time. It's about politics and power. I haven't read from Awo's book, My March Through Prison. Let's hear his daughter's reflection. I'm talking about Dr. Tokunbo Awolowo Dosumu. Awolowo in prison. The day he went to prison, what was the house like?
The day he was sentenced, I wasn't at home. It was in September. I think I was in school. But of course, it was a sad day, especially because our brother died tragically in a car accident on July 10. And one would have thought that on compassionate grounds, that the situation would be different. But I think it was September 11 he was sentenced. So it was a very sad time.
Awolowo's imprisonment was not just a personal tragedy. It was a blow to Nigeria's democracy. His words spoken in court were prophetic. He said in court that the present twilight of democracy, individual freedom, and the rule of law would change or might change into utter darkness. And so it did. The discontent bred by Awolowo's trial, the findings of the Coker Commission, and the deeply flawed Western Region election of 1965 led to Operation Wetie, a wave of violence, protests, and reprisals. Political scores were settled in blood, and the fragile unity of Nigeria began to crumble. Shola Odunfa, a journalist with the Nigerian Tribune at the time, speaks on Operation Wetie.
Wetie was a popular uprising in the West. As hot as things were then, they still identified everybody. If you were from the Tribune, you were safe anywhere in the West except Ubomosho, which was Akintola's hometown. Because things were so bad, socially, economically. And they said, look, they couldn't stand this anymore. They had seen a government run by Awolowo, and they had partaken of the good things. They had had their children educated at school free of charge. They had visited hospitals and not charged any fees for minor ailments. And now things were very bad. Inflation was out in the roof. Foodstuffs were very expensive. There was little or no security anywhere. So you wouldn't blame them. They had to rise. That look, we don't want this government anymore because the situation is really oppressing us. That was what they said.
In the midst of that emotional outburst, how did you frame your stories?
I wrote what I saw and what I was told.
Were you
Nothing
quite
more.
emotional? Remember, you said you leaned towards Awolowo.
Yes.
Did you express it in your writings for the Tribune?
To a large extent, for the Tribune, I did. Because I enjoyed what I was writing. I liked the reaction of the people to the economic and political situation of the day.
You saw the killings,
Of course, yes.
the burnings,
Of course, yes.
kinsmen turning against themselves.
My friend, uprising anywhere is not a Tumbo party. It's not a Kegais gathering. If you were not involved in the politics, especially against the interests of the people, you were free to move around. And if you were neutral, just stay in your house or at your workplace. Nobody would bother you.
In January 1966, a military coup swept through Nigeria, claiming the lives of the Prime Minister of Nigeria, Tafawa Balewa, and the Premier of the Northern Region, Ahmadu Bello. Also assassinated was the Premier of the Western Region, Samuel Akintola. Other political and military leaders were not left out. The coup plunged the country into chaos, setting the stage for the Nigerian Civil War. Awolowo was released from prison in 1966, but by then, Nigeria was a different country, one scarred by division, violence, and the erosion of democratic ideals. The twilight of democracy had indeed turned into utter darkness. As we round off this discourse, let me remind you of the importance of reading Obafemi Awolowo's books. You can look here. His books are here. You can read Awo, an autobiography. You have another of his book, Awo, on the Nigerian Civil War. I have read From My March Through Prison. Another interesting work of Obafemi Awolowo is My Early Life. Have you read Path to Nigeria Freedom? You should read that book. Strategy and Tactics of the People. When you read that, you will discover how strategic Awolowo was in using knowledge as a tool for national development. He also wrote the work The Problems of Africa. That was the first book I read. It was a lecture he delivered in Ghana. The Problems of Africa, the need for an ideological reappraisal. Have you read his thoughts on the Nigerian Constitution? We have the books here. Travails of Democracy is the number 2 book in the series, Adventures in Power. The first is My March Through Prison. Sadly, he did not release the third one before he died. Voice of Reason, Voice of Courage, and Voice of Wisdom are collections of Obafemi Awolowo's great speeches. Another interesting book you will find in this collection is this one entitled In the Radiance of a Sage. It is the biography of Awolowo's wife. That biography is like the biography of Obafemi Awolowo because his wife's life was tied to Awolowo's adventures in power. Another book you should read is this one by Pa Ayo Adebanjo, Awolowo's man, telling it as it is. Ayo Adebanjo left the world recently, but here he told his story of politics and power. And Awu is in this book from the first page to the last page, telling it as it is by Awolowo's man, Pa Ayo Adebanjo. It is about history, politics, and power. Today, as we reflect on Awolowo's imprisonment and its aftermath, we are reminded of the fragility of democracy and the high cost of political quarrels. The lessons of history are clear. When leaders prioritize power over principle, when justice is weaponized, and when the voices of the people are silenced, the consequences can be catastrophic. Despite the troubles he saw, Awolowo's legacy endures. As we navigate the challenges of our own time, let us remember the lessons of the past and make sure we are able to build a Nigeria where democracy, freedom, and justice prevail. I am Edmund Obilo.